Today, embedded devices are used to store a wide variety of data. Some of that data is inherently secure, possibly through encryption or encoding. Regardless of the storage details, when the data is removed, the system designer expects it to be gone. There's no lasting security through obscurity. So what does it mean to remove data? Why is NAND different from past media? We'll give you a quick intro to that. We'll also talk about secure data on the NAND and ultimately end up at the hidden cost of removing that data. We'll examine the layers of an embedded system, the interfaces that can be used to deal with secure data in NAND-based devices like eMMC and SSD, and how the file system also needs to deal with that. What can an application do to make this easier and more effective? Then I'll wrap up with final thoughts. Proper security is a process that encompasses the design of an entire system. Neglecting the process will lead to suboptimal data removal, increase the risk of sensitive data falling into the wrong hands, and in many cases, greatly reduce the lifetime of the device. Let's take a look at data removal through history. Data etched in stone can be defaced. Data on clay tablets can be crumbled. More recently, data on paper can be burned or shredded. Data on tapes can be erased, especially 18.5 minutes of incriminating data. Or can it? On magnetic media, a simple erase was shown to be ineffective, leaving remnants behind. A technique known as scanning probe microscopy was used to find those remnants with a very high resolution. To allow more storage and lower prices, media vendors used shortcuts like multiplex and run-length limited encoding, also known as RLL. These tricks ultimately made recovery of the data even easier. We'll come back to shortcuts in the NAND section. In the case of the Nixon tapes, overwrite of the data proved somewhat effective, if a bit incriminating. In the decades we've had magnetic media, many people have studied how to remove secure data. Full erasure involves an erase, an overwrite with the complement, and other strategies. These also apply to DRAM, where my understanding is you need to reduce how long the data is in a given location. Government and military specifications document the requirements we talked about here. Are they appropriate for NAND flash? So, all of you have heard of NAND flash, and many of you know how it works. Bear with me while I give a brief overview and how it limits us for secure removal of data. This is an abstract view of NAND media with two important objects, the write page and the erase block. The minimum size you can erase is an entire erase block. I won't go into the circuit level details, but this is a slow process, and we'll come back to that soon. The minimum size you can write is a full write page. The write page can't be overwritten or appended to. Any update means replacing it with a new one and then marking the original one as obsolete. This is known as copy on write. Both these processes are fairly straightforward and public-facing. Another is less well-known, and that is compaction, also known as garbage collection. When the data on several of these write pages is marked obsolete, the remaining write pages with good data are copied to free locations. Each of them are now marked obsolete, so that a later erase can clear up entire erase blocks. This compaction takes place in the firmware of drives like eMMC, SSD, and SD cards. Our company has provided a software flash translation layer for nearly 30 years. I speak from experience. So which write pages can have secure data? Well, originals of write pages that were updated, originals of write pages where the data secure was copied elsewhere, waiting for a compaction, any situations with secure data in an erase block which hasn't been erased yet, and then of course any live pages with secure data. There's other situations like static wear leveling that could cause copies of secure data as well. The internals of the NAND firmware are not available to the rest of us, so I can only speculate on other situations. So why so many copies of the data? Like previously, this is another shortcut. This time it's for performance. NAND is slow to erase. Usually extra erase blocks are available, hidden from the user, so the erase can happen in idle time. The throughput values on the vendor datasheets take this into account. Now, to meet the goal of security, secure data has to be erased immediately, even if this erase block isn't fully written. You may have heard of write amplification, which increases the amount of data written. This is erase amplification, and it really ultimately reduces the amount of data that can be written to the device, also known as the lifetime, which is measured in program and erase cycles. This is less of a problem for a few keys, a few secure data pieces, but a database with many secure items can really impact the device lifetime. Having to erase immediately will also slow performance. Embedded designers can have security or speed, but not both. In the next section, I want to discuss the NAND interfaces that can be used. NAND-based media requires software to manage it, and that's often provided in firmware. As previously noted, the firmware isn't available to read, so be sure to get the specifics from your NAND flash vendor, and check those specifics if you make a bill of materials change to a new vendor. JEDEC manages eMMC, so I'd like to start with that as an example. The JEDEC specifications 4.5 and earlier provided a secure erase command to augment the standard erase command for secure data. I don't know how it worked internally, probably different for different vendors, whether that forced an immediate compaction or merely marked the page as removed. But it did give a direct level of control to remove secure data. In fact, we adapted our Reliance Nitro file system to provide a secure delete, which matched up with this secure erase on the eMMC. In newer versions of the specification, they marked this command as obsolete and replaced it with sanitize. Instead of removing a single secure page, the sanitize command removes all of the pending pages, whether or not they contain secure data. As you can imagine, on a system with a lot of write page changes, this command can take quite a while to complete. Partly as a way of dealing with that delay, JEDEC added a secure removal type to the specification. This way vendors can provide options for their customers, including a few old friends. The extended CSD register can be used not only to set the secure removal type, but to get the potential types available. Here are the various options that can be available. Bit 0 is the type I just described, where the pages and blocks are erased immediately, whatever the time cost. It is the default. Bit 1 removes the information, overwrites the block, and then erases that. Bit 2 overwrites and erases, overwrites with the complement and erases, and then overwrites with a random character and erases. We've seen this earlier, the old magnetic media erase techniques. Were these added because they were effective on NAND-based media, or were they added to comply with government and military regulations? I suspect the latter. What I can say is that using these operations on media with a lot of erase blocks to sanitize will seriously impact the program and erase counts and shrink the life of the media. Bit 3 specifies a vendor method, so again, reach out to your vendor. One vendor we work with defines bit 3 as clearing the physical to logical address table. This is kind of like removing the shelf tags in a library while leaving the books. The secure information is still there. Ultimately, you'll have to have a conversation with your customer and your vendor to make sure that secure erase requirements are being met. I'm neither a lawyer nor a cat, so I cannot advise you on this process. eMMC and UFS use firmware on the chip. Our Tuxera software provides raw flash with a software controller instead and allows full control over secure erase and compactions. There's other forms of NAND-based media as well. SSDs, connecting over SATA or eSATA, may be able to use the ATA secure erase command if that's supported by the vendor. My research shows that this command acts drive-wide, erasing the entire media and essentially restoring it to a factory default setting. This is good for the use case of transferring the device to a new user, but not so good for removing a few files with secure data. As usual, I suggest speaking to your media vendor. SD cards don't seem to support either one of these interfaces, and there's no way to directly remove secure data on this popular medium. Being a removable and portable format, I'm sure that securely removing data wasn't in the planned use case. The SD Association is looking at other, less removable form factors, and Tuxera plans to encourage them to adopt secure erase techniques for those designs. That said, I did find downloadable utilities for securely erasing the SD. They seem to follow the magnetic media clearing model with overwrite and complement. They don't have low-level access to the individual blocks, and none of the readmes or documents even mention the topics I've covered here. That means the these types of utilities would both shorten the life of your media and not remove any of the secure data. Really not the best outcome. Before I move on to the file system, I'll conclude that in order to securely remove data, the firmware or software must be able to directly address the NAND and exercise control over normal erase and compaction. File systems only deal with the media, using read, write, and erase. When a file system overwrites a sector, the NAND will write the data to a new page. Remember, there's no overwrite possible, and the original data is marked as no longer in use by the firmware or the software. When a file system erases data, what happens next is based on an additional interface known as discard or trim. This command allows the file system to notify the media when a write page or block device sector is no longer in use. Until the file system notifies the media, this data is considered valid, and a sanitize command will not remove that data. Mounting a drive with discard or trim enabled is done with this option, though your file system choice may vary. When this command is enabled, each erase is followed by a discard. In some use cases, this can slow the performance of the media. If dealing with a lot of small files, discarding after each one can effectively double the workload and possibly shorten the life of the media. This is also known as automatic trim. Another command acts as a manual trim, and that's FS trim. This command can be called infrequently, where it will discard all the deleted blocks. Grouping multiple discards together will provide better performance, but on the other hand, any firmware operation that happens before FS trim is called will treat that deleted data as valid. In other words, it's a trade-off. The small performance hit noted for automatic trim, or this command here, is why Linux file systems have this discard option disabled by default. And that's a bad idea. To measure just how bad, we performed a series of write-erase pairs with discards disabled and measured the write performance. Once the entire media, in this case an 8 GB part, was used once, each subsequent write required an invisible erase at the firmware level, and this dropped the write performance considerably. You can bet that the higher performance was shown on the datasheet. Utilizing a smart discard or a regular FS trim allows the design to clean up during idle time, if your use case has that, and you end up with a consistently high performance over the life of the device, not just the first 8 GB. So, what about the application level? It doesn't have access to the media discard interface, but it can often choose how frequently FS trim is called. Calling FS trim during idle time removes discard pages and shortens the required time for a sanitize. Even without access to FS trim, a file system can overwrite the secure data first. Of course, the NAND isn't truly overwritten, as we talked about, but the data from the previous write page will be marked as obsolete internally on the NAND by the Flash Media Manager without the file system intervention. Keeping secure data together in one manageable location will also minimize the impact on the media. While a database may be convenient for your use case, the secure data and possible second backup copy may be scattered in different locations. The best solution would be to bring your concerns to the database vendor for a proper solution. The biggest problem with mishandling secure data isn't a problem if the device doesn't fall into the wrong hands. The second biggest problem in dealing with secure data improperly, which we've shown reduces the life of the flash media, both those fall under added cost. So doing it the right way is a cost savings. Besides the direct user experience of data in the wrong hands, handling secure erase properly means a more responsive device and less downtime. Coming back to where we started, secure data removal is the result of a process, including discussion with your vendors and planning the best handling by the file system and the application. We provide file systems and flash management software, so this is a discussion I've had with many potential and current customers. This is my contact information if you'd like to reach out to me.